Today we're going to talk about MLA citation for academic sources. All an academic source is something that you would use for school or in higher learning. So we're going to start learning it now. So as a quick review, let's put these websites in order of authority. So pause the video for a moment. The one that has the most authority all the way down to the one that has the least authority. And you should be able to tell this by the URL itself and what it ends in, rather than these are not actual websites to click on. So here's the answer. The most trustworthy site is a .gov site, because we assume that the government is giving us accurate information. The next one is coming from an education source, Columbia University. That's very credible too. We have a URL here called random.com. We don't really know what random is, but it is a .com, so we know we can look for information, but we also know that we have to be very careful because they're probably trying to sell something, or they could be a company representing sales of something. And the last one is a blogspot. We know that blogs are the least credible because there's no way to really identify who the author is. So several items go into a citation, and I have a list here. The author, the title of the source, the container, other contributors, that means like editors and things like that, version number, publisher, publication date, and location. Now, it's very important to know that not every single one of these items is in every single citation, and that does not mean that it's not credible. So we're going to go over these one by one, and I'll show you some examples. So the author is very important. A government site will not have an author because the government takes its own credit. It doesn't take credit to anyone else. And very often, company websites will not have authors because it's just done by staff. So not having an author does not necessarily mean it's not credible, but you really do need to look for the author's name. Now, in this case, the author is Homi Bhabha. So your first thing in a citation is going to need to be the author's name. Now, this is not the editor or anything like that. This is the person who wrote the article. Now, there are times when a web article will not have a credited author, and at that point, you'll start with the title, but we'll talk about that in just a minute. So this is a book. So I have an example giving out in class in a day or two of several different types of citations. But notice the author's last name is capitalized. It comes first, a comma, the first name, middle initial, and period. The next one is the title of the source. When you're looking at sources, you need to see if it qualifies for italics or quotation marks. Remember that large things like books and plays, newspapers and journals have italics for the title. So, Hail Marion, and then the title of the book, Darkwater Rising, in italic. This is a little different if you were doing this online. For example, Susan Lundman wrote an article about how to make vegetarian chili. An article on a website is quoted, just like an article in a book or a magazine or small works like poems and short stories. The title of a container. All right, so the container in MLA is the larger thing that the work is contained in. So if you think about this, there are chapters in books, there are articles in magazines and on websites. So like in the previous example, we quoted the website article. That's because the container is the website. Stories or poems that are in your textbook are also quoted. The title of the container is italicized and followed by a comma. So we have Kincaid, Jamaica, so that is the author. She wrote Girl, which is a poem. And I found that poem in the Vintage Book of Contemporary American Short Stories. So the Vintage Book, is the container. Other contributors. Sometimes you will have other contributors to the work, and it's usually like an editor or an illustrator or a translator. So that would go after the container. You don't run into this a whole lot unless you're on some kind of education site like that ends in edu, like a college website. When you get into college and are starting to work on searching in databases, you'll have this. It's not real common, the research you do in middle and high school. So when you don't have another contributor, you just skip it and move on to the next thing. In this case, the next thing is the version. So what that looks like is an addition. All right. So this is a citation for the Bible. It's the Authorized King James Version, and it's the third edition. And all that means is that it was published, and then the second time it was published, they made a couple of changes. We don't know what they are. That's not the point when you're citing. So in this case, it's the third citing. So that way, if I'm going back to find the evidence that you took from that source, I can go to the right edition because it won't be in the first or second, or at least it might not be. The number. This is another one of those ones that you're going to come up against more often in college research, but I'm going to touch on it anyway. Anytime you have a multi-volume book or a journal, they are numbered, so you'll have issue numbers and things like that. For example, this citation comes from 94 meetings from the show Parks and Recreation, created by Greg Daniels and Michael Schur, performance by Amy Poehler. So this would be other contributors. And when you cite a video or like a movie, a DVD or something like that, it's a little more detailed and there's some nuances in it. It's not like citing a YouTube video. That's a little easier. But this episode came from season 2 and it's numbered as episode 21. So that's where the numbers come in. But like I said, this is not something you're always going to have. In fact, you don't have it very often until you get to the college research. The publisher. Okay, so you'll see here, this is Daniels, Gregg, and Michael Schur. They are the creators of Parks and Recreation. And the publisher, in this case, because it's a TV series, is a production company. So D Productions and Universal Media Studios. Now, if you were going to cite like your textbook, it would be Savvis. The publication date is the year that the information was published. Now, if it's a book or if it's like, an episode of a TV show, you're going to put the year. So if you're looking on a website, that could be the date of the actual article or the date it was updated, or it could be the copyright date, showing that the website is current, the one at the bottom. And the last thing is location. This doesn't always apply either. If you have page numbers and a source, like this one is an article contained in the thing around your neck. It was published by Alfred A. Knopf, which is a publishing company, in 2009. And this part here on Monday of last week can be found on pages 74 to 94. And this only happens if you have a source that has page numbers. They don't all. A lot of electronic sources do not have page numbers. So at that point, you skip it. And then the access date. This is very important. It is considered optional, but I want you to include it. The access date is the date that you saw that article. The reason this can help me is if I am looking for the article because I want more information or I need to check it for something. If I go to a librarian who has ways of doing fancy research, I can say, I wanted to see this article here by this author. This is where it was at the URL. Last time I saw it was this date. And they can do research and they can help you find that article. Sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not, but it's very important to have an access date in the event, especially if something is not actually dated. The place I always tell students to go to check for citations and how to do it is the Purdue OWL MLA Citations. Okay, so if I just put it in here, Purdue OWL MLA Citation. And it would work in a Google, DuckDuckGo, any kind of search engine. It doesn't have to be anything specific. It's typically the first source, MLA. This one says MLA in-text citations. This is the formatting style. This is the works cited page. Well, because we're doing the works cited page, I know I'm going to go here. So if I go to that page, Purdue is a university, and OWL stands for Online Writing Lab. So these are the basic rules of citation. I went over a lot of these with you. This is telling you how to set up a paper. We've done that with the template. These are the different specifics about MLA citation. You don't have to worry about that right now. For right now, we're going to go to MLA Works Cited Electronic Sources. And that's because all of our research so far has been web pages. So one important bit of information is the best practices for managing online sources. Remember, you've always got to use TRAP to make sure that your source is credible. and then the URLs. You want to look at them to make sure that they make sense, that they're not some kind of weird thing. That was also in the trap video. You want to make sure that you're looking at credible sites. So government and education sites are one of the best things to do. As you can see, we're on alpurdue.edu, so we're at a credible site. All right, if you scroll down this page, you can look at how to cite an entire website, which you really don't ever need to use. Okay, and then they have different titles, a page on a website. Everyone did a page on a website for their research for what you're going to be doing now. You have the author, the title, the container, the URL without the HTTPS, and then the access date. Okay, so what you can do is you can go and find your URLs. Remember, I told you to put them on underneath each one of your paragraphs that you did on that determining credibility worksheet. You can actually go up here and post it in there. So let me find a source. I'm going to copy the URL, and then I'm going to go back over here to this, and I'm going to hit the cite button. Now, the tricky part with this citation is that you need to check it. You need to make sure that you have done it. It has cited itself correctly. Okay, so I put it in the URL. It says, is this the URL? And is that the author? And is that the title? And I say yes. So I'm going to hit cite. Now, this is a free citation machine, and so you're going to get ads. And it is coming from citationmachine.net, so they are trying to make money. The site can be a little bit annoying, but it is helpful. All right, so it's given me the article title, the URL, the website, the date accessed, and the date published. So I can check all these myself again and look at the actual source. It doesn't have a publisher or a sponsor. That may be something we have to go back to the source to find, or sometimes it pops up in the citation anyway. But let's look at this. This title is not properly punctuated. Okay, it needs to be capitalized, right? You have to capitalize the big words in a title, or the main words of a title. Okay, the author is Eudora Welty. It came from the Atlantic website, so that's the container. It did. The Atlantic Media Company. Okay, so it did find that, and it found it from the URL. And then it has the published date and today's date, which is the day I found it. So I'm going to complete the citation. And I'm going to use MLA 9th. All right, so here it is. So it says copy citation. So I can go over here, and if I can go over to a Google Doc. Now in your example, you'll already have the template set up. I just don't have that set up right now. So I'm going to paste the citation here. But if I look at the citation, it's not in Times New Roman, it's not double spaced, and it's also missing something called a hanging indent. Okay, so this citation did not go all the way to the 1-inch margin. So if I highlight it, I just drag this to the margin. And how this looks on a computer versus how this looks on the iPad is somewhat different. So I need to change the font to Times New Roman, and I need to change it to 12. Okay, now it's not double spaced, but do you see how my highlight is kind of, it's going further above the line than just the line? That is because it's adding extra space in addition to the double space. So if you go over to, not the align, to double space, go to custom spacing. All right, you want to put 2 for double, and this before and after you want to change to 0. And this is under the A at the top column of your Google Doc app. Okay, and then so on the Google Docs app, this needs to be put back together so you can insert and enter, and then you can tab over. One tab makes it a hanging indent. So each citation will begin at the left margin, and if it continues onto the second line, it goes down indented. Now, it is missing the access date, and I do want that. So we're going to put that in. And we're going to follow the same date format. So today is 8 December 2021. Okay, now, so to fix this so that it aligns with that, I just hit enter. Okay, and you would follow that same format for all the others. One thing that's very important is you need to check the formatting. Okay, so the container is italicized because remember, big things are italicized. You can go and check the periods and the commas against the example on that citation page from the Purdue OWL. The biggest thing to change when you are copying and pasting this is to check for italics and the actual format so that it's put in as a hanging indent, because the citation machines won't help you with that. The last thing to do, and I've gotten some conflicting information on this, but for right now, I believe that you need to remove the HTTPS : so that you just start the citation with the www. So highlight it and delete it, and it should be perfect. Let me know if you have any questions. Bye.